My name is Margaret Hill, and I turned 66 last spring. I thought I'd seen enough storms for one lifetime, burying my husband, surviving heart surgery, losing my sister just a week ago. But nothing prepared me for the storm waiting on my front lawn that gray Monday afternoon. When I pulled into the driveway, rain was sliding down the windshield in crooked lines. Through it, I saw colors scattered across the grass, blue china plates, framed photos, my late husband's army jacket. For a second, I thought maybe a raccoon had torn open some boxes in the garage. Then I saw her, Amanda, my daughter-in-law, standing by the porch with a trash bag and a smirk. "I cleaned up for you," she said. "You should thank me. It's just old junk." My breath caught. Those plates were my mother's wedding china. That jacket had folded over my husband's coffin. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I reached for my phone, and the sound of the shutter clicking cut through the rain. One photo after another. Evidence, not memories. Amanda laughed. "You really think taking pictures will help? You live here because we let you." Her words landed harder than the thunder behind her. Somewhere deep inside, anger and heartbreak twisted together into something colder, clarity. I wiped the rain from my face and said, quietly, "Amanda, you've mistaken my kindness for permission." I turned, still shaking, and walked inside. Boxes were stacked by the door. The hallway smelled of bleach and new paint. On the dining table, a note sat under my favorite vase, broken clean in two. It read, "We've cleared your room. Hope you don't mind staying in the storage area for a while." For the first time since my husband's funeral, my hands trembled. But instead of crying, I opened my laptop, signed into my bank account, and whispered to the empty house, "If everything that's mine has become trash to you, then let's see what you'll have left when I'm done cleaning." When I stepped inside, the air felt different, like the house itself had turned its back on me. The walls were freshly painted in a shade I'd never seen before, and the scent of bleach stung my throat. My framed photographs were gone. The bookshelf my husband built from walnut boards 30 years ago, empty. Amanda's voice carried from the kitchen. "You'll find your things in the storage room. Margaret, Ethan said it's fine." I stood there, rainwater dripping from my coat, trying to steady my breath. The storage room, she meant, was a 6 by 8 foot space next to the laundry. No windows, just one flickering bulb. I walked toward it slowly. My boxes were stacked against the wall, some open, some crushed. The framed photo of my wedding day had a crack across my husband's face. Amanda appeared behind me, holding a mug of coffee, perfectly calm. "I needed your old room for my home office," she said. "I'm working remotely now, and Ethan thought this would be best." Ethan, my only son. I could almost hear his voice in my head, always apologetic, always choosing the easy way out. "Where is he?" I asked. "Out with a client," she said, shrugging. "He didn't want to upset you." I brushed the dust off one of my boxes, hands trembling. "You had no right." Amanda cut me off, her tone sugar-coated but sharp underneath. "You gave us this house, remember? We just need space. It's not personal." I turned to face her. "Everything in this house is personal, Amanda." She smiled faintly, like I was a child who didn't understand how the world worked. "Well, maybe it's time you start letting go of the past. Things change." She walked away, humming, her heels tapping across the hardwood I'd polished for years. I could hear drawers opening, the clatter of dishes. My chest ached, not from anger this time, but from something heavier. The room I was supposed to call mine barely fit a bed and a lamp. I sat down on the small mattress and stared at the peeling paint. The rain outside grew louder, drumming against the windowless walls. For years, I'd believed giving Ethan this house after his wedding was a gift of love, a way to keep family close. Now it felt like a mistake carved in stone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing my husband's voice, his laugh echoing from the old kitchen, the scrape of his boots by the door. Every memory had been boxed away, labeled trash. At dawn, I made coffee in silence. Amanda's purse was on the counter, wide open, with receipts spilling out. My eyes caught a total, $200 for a designer bag, purchased 2 days ago. I frowned. Ethan's salary barely covered their mortgage payments. Then I saw the name on the card used, mine. I froze. My heart began to race. I checked my wallet. My debit card was still there, but something didn't feel right. When they'd helped me pay hospital bills after my surgery last year, Ethan had temporary access to my account. I never closed that access. I opened my laptop, logged in, and felt the blood drain from my face. $48,000. Gone. Withdrawn in pieces over the last 3 months. I stared at the numbers, the dates, the small notes that said transfer approved. The coffee went cold. I printed the statements and slid them into an envelope. My hands didn't shake this time. I walked outside, stood on the porch where Amanda had laughed at me the day before, and took a long breath. The neighborhood was quiet, except for Mrs. Lewis, my next-door neighbor, watering her plants. She waved. "Morning, Margaret. I saw your daughter-in-law selling some furniture yesterday. You redecorating again?" My throat tightened. Selling what furniture? Mrs. Lewis frowned. The dining set, the one with the carved legs. Beautiful pieces. She said you didn't need them anymore. I felt the world tilt slightly beneath me. That set belonged to my mother. I thanked her, turned back toward the house, and closed the door gently behind me. Inside, Amanda was on the phone, laughing. I could hear her say, "Yes, it's antique. She won't even notice it's gone." I stared at the envelope in my hand, the bank statements, the proof. For a brief, cold moment, I imagined throwing everything back in her face right then, but instead, I whispered to myself, steady and quiet, "No, not yet." Because storms are predictable things. They start with clouds, but they always end with thunder. And I was done being silent before it broke. The next morning, the house was still. I could hear the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the soft ticking of the wall clock, and my own heartbeat, steady, deliberate. Something in me had shifted overnight. Fear had turned into focus. I drove to the office of Mr. Sanders, a retired attorney who had been a friend of my late husband. His office smelled of old books and peppermint. When he looked up and saw me standing in the doorway with a folder clutched to my chest, his eyes softened. "Margaret," he said gently, "it's been a long time." "I need your help," I told him, "before they take everything that's left of me." We sat down, and I spread out the printed bank statements across his desk. He put on his glasses and read each line carefully. When he finally looked up, his expression was calm, but there was a fire behind his eyes. "Your name is still on the deed," he said. "Legally, this is your property. You gave them permission to live there, but you never transferred ownership. So they can't throw me out," I whispered. He shook his head. "No. In fact, you could charge them rent if you wanted to, or you can tell them to leave." The thought of it made my chest tighten, not because I didn't want justice, but because I couldn't believe it had come to this. My son, my own flesh and blood, reduced to a tenant. Mr. Sanders leaned forward. "Don't act rashly. Document everything. Change your passwords, get a safety deposit box, and Margaret." He hesitated. Don't let anger write your next move. Let evidence do it. When I left his office, the afternoon sun cut through the clouds for the first time that week. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, feeling the warmth on my hands. For the first time in months, I wasn't scared. I was ready. That evening, I printed new passwords for every account and locked the copies in a tin box. I took photos of every item that still belonged to me, each dish, each framed picture, each piece of jewelry, and backed them up online. When Ethan came home, I was sitting at the kitchen table, calm as still water. "Hey, Mom," he said, setting down his briefcase. "Amanda told me you were upset yesterday. You know how she gets? She didn't mean anything." I looked at him, really looked at him. The boy I'd once stayed up all night nursing through fevers. The man who now looked at me like a stranger in my own house. "She used my account." "Ethan," I said quietly, "nearly $50,000 is missing." He blinked, stunned. "What? That can't be. Maybe there's a mistake." "Maybe," I said, folding the paper in front of him. "But if it's not, then I'll have to let the police decide." His face went pale. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then whispered, "I'll talk to her." "Do that," I said, standing up. "Because tomorrow, there will be a contract on this table. Either you both sign as tenants, or you move out." I left him there, frozen, and walked back to my small room. Behind me, I heard his voice trembling, calling my name, but I didn't turn back. On the nightstand, I placed the tin box beside my wedding ring and whispered, "One more storm, John, just one more." Outside, thunder rumbled again, but this time, I wasn't afraid of the rain. 2 days later, Amanda suggested a family dinner. Her tone was syrupy sweet, the kind that always meant trouble. "Let's clear the air," she said. "We could all use a calm conversation." I agreed, not because I believed her, but because calm was exactly what I wanted, for now. The dining room looked almost unrecognizable. My lace tablecloth was gone, replaced by a plastic runner with gold patterns. The chandelier lights were dimmed. Candles flickered between plates of steak and asparagus. Amanda had dressed up, pearls at her neck, glass of wine already in hand. Ethan looked nervous. He hadn't said much since our talk about the missing money. I could see the weight in his shoulders, the exhaustion behind his eyes. Amanda smiled as if nothing had happened. "So," she said, raising her glass, "to family?" I lifted my own, though mine was only water. "To truth," I replied. Her smile faltered just slightly. "You've been busy. Margaret, Ethan told me about that contract idea. Surely you're not serious." I placed a folder on the table, the crisp sound cutting through her laughter. "It's already printed," I said. "A rental agreement, effective immediately. You both have 30 days to either sign or vacate." Ethan's fork clattered onto his plate. "Mom, please don't do this here." Amanda's voice rose, sharp. "You're threatening us in our own home?" "Our?" I asked quietly. "You mean my home. The deed's still in my name. You never owned a brick of it." She froze, eyes flicking toward Ethan, who sat motionless. "That can't be true," she said finally. "It's true," I said, sliding a copy of the deed across the table. "And so is this." I laid down the bank statements. $48,000 transferred without my consent. Amanda's face drained of color. "You can't prove—" "I can, and I already have." Ethan reached for the papers with shaking hands. He skimmed them, then looked at her, disbelief turning into something darker, realization. "Amanda, tell me you didn't—" She swallowed, eyes darting. "I borrowed it. For us, Ethan. Your mother said she wanted to help." I stood, my chair sliding back. "Help doesn't mean blind robbery." The room went quiet except for the faint hiss of the candles. Amanda's lips trembled, but the defiance never left her eyes. "You're ruining your son's marriage. Over money." I met her gaze evenly. "No, Amanda. You did that the moment you decided to steal from me?" Ethan stood up too, his face torn between shame and anger. "We'll pay you back, Mom," he said weakly. I nodded once. "You will. But not while you're living here rent-free." Amanda shoved her chair back and pointed at me, her voice breaking. "You can't throw us out. You wouldn't survive alone." Something in her words made me smile. A small, sad smile. You'd be surprised what a woman can survive. Before either of them could speak again, I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. My hands went cold, the edges of the room blurred. I reached for the table to steady myself, but my knees buckled. Ethan caught me before I hit the floor. His voice sounded far away, frantic. Mom, stay with me." I could hear Amanda shouting, her words tangled between fear and guilt. The candles flickered, the plates rattled, and the world tilted into darkness. When I woke, everything smelled of antiseptic and rain. I was in a hospital bed, the heart monitor beeping slowly beside me. A nurse adjusted the blanket and said softly, "You're lucky, ma'am. Stress can do more damage than you think." I turned my head toward the window. Storm clouds still gathered over the city. Somewhere in that thunder, I heard my husband's voice again, calm and steady. "Don't back down now," and I knew I wouldn't. Because this wasn't the end of the storm, just the eye of it. The doctors kept me overnight. They called it a mild heart episode brought on by stress, though I knew it was more than that. It was betrayal, the slow kind that eats through trust until even love can't cover the holes. When I was discharged, Ethan was waiting in the hallway. His face looked older, worn down by guilt. "Mom," he whispered, "I'm sorry, I didn't know what she was doing." I wanted to believe him, I really did, but the truth was sitting between us like a locked door. "You should have," I said softly. "That's what hurts the most. At home." Amanda was gone. Her clothes, her computer, even her toothbrush, vanished. Ethan said she'd gone to stay with her mother for a while. I didn't ask when she'd be back. A week passed in quiet. I tried to rest, to let my heart slow down. Then one afternoon, the phone rang. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, tremulous. "Mrs. Hill? This is Linda Carson, Amanda's mother." I hesitated. "Yes?" There was a pause, then a sigh. "I thought you should know. Amanda isn't pregnant. She never was." I sank into the nearest chair, the phone pressed to my ear. "What do you mean?" "She lied to everyone. She told Ethan the baby was the reason you had to move out, that she needed space. But Amanda can't have children. Margaret. She's known for years. She lies when she's desperate." My heart clenched, not just from anger, but from pity. Desperation is a cruel disease. It robs people of decency before they even realize they've lost it. When I hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the framed photo of Ethan as a boy, missing his 2 front teeth, smiling like he had the whole world ahead of him. That evening, Ethan came home pale and shaking. "She confessed," he said, "about the money, about the baby, everything." He dropped to his knees beside my chair. "I'm filing for divorce." I placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. "Do it with dignity," I said. "Don't let anger be the last thing she takes from you." He nodded, eyes wet, and for the first time in months, he looked like my son again. Outside, the rain began to fall, soft, cleansing, forgiving, and I felt something loosen inside me, a knot that had been there too long. The storm was ending, but I wasn't done yet. Justice had one more step. Ethan filed for divorce within the month. The process was quiet, almost eerily so. Amanda didn't fight much. She couldn't. The evidence spoke louder than either of us ever could. Mr. Sanders handled the case with his usual calm precision. He met me in his office one morning, the air thick with the smell of coffee and old paper. "It's done," he said, handing me a manila envelope. "The court granted full ownership back to you, and Amanda is under investigation for financial misrepresentation." I ran my fingers over the edge of the envelope, not sure whether to feel relief or sorrow, maybe both. "What about Ethan? He's been cooperative," Mr. Sanders said. "He's repaying what was taken, slowly but consistently." I nodded, though a part of me still hurt for him. Watching your own family crumble because of greed isn't something any mother wishes for. Yet sometimes, you have to let things break before they can be rebuilt. When I drove home, the house felt strangely peaceful. Boxes had been cleared. Amanda's perfume no longer hung in the air. The silence was no longer heavy. It was healing. I walked to the backyard where my husband's old chair still sat by the garden. The wood creaked when I sank into it, and for the first time in months, I let myself exhale. A few weeks later, Ethan came by. He looked tired, but sober, cleaner somehow, as if he'd washed off months of shame. He handed me a set of documents. "It's the deed," he said. "I signed it over to you officially. I want no confusion this time." I smiled faintly. "You didn't need to do that." "Ethan?" "Yes, I did," he said. You gave me a home, and I let someone turn it into a battleground. I'll spend the rest of my life making that right." We sat on the porch for a long while, saying little. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't need words. It just needs time to breathe. A month later, I sold the house. It wasn't out of anger, but out of closure. I bought a smaller one by the lake, where mornings start with the sound of ducks and not arguments. I planted the same roses my husband once loved and placed his photograph by the window facing the water. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, I brewed a cup of tea and whispered, "We did it, John. We took it all back." The reflection in the window showed a woman older, yes, but stronger. I realized then that dignity isn't given by family or money. It's reclaimed, one boundary at a time. I turned off the porch light and smiled, knowing the storm had passed for good. Spring came early that year. The lake thawed before April, and the mornings carried the scent of pine and wet earth. I'd begun to keep a small notebook by the kitchen window where I wrote things I wanted to remember. Not the pain, not the betrayal, but the lessons that came after. Most mornings, I walked to the dock with my tea and watched the sun rise over the water. The quiet no longer scared me. It felt earned. Every ripple on that lake reminded me of what survival looks like, how far a person can drift and still find their way back to shore. Ethan visited every Sunday. He'd mow the grass, fix small things around the house, or just sit with me while I talked about the garden. There was a gentleness in him now, the kind that only comes after losing something precious. "One afternoon," he said, "You know, Mom, I thought forgiving myself would be impossible. But watching you move on like this, it makes me believe I can, too." I reached over, touched his hand, and smiled. That's the thing about storms, oh sweetheart. They leave scars, but they also make the ground stronger. After he left that day, I went back inside and opened a small wooden box on my shelf. Inside were 3 photos: my husband in uniform, Ethan as a little boy, and me standing in front of the house I once thought I'd die in. I didn't keep them out of nostalgia anymore. I kept them as proof that I'd lived, learned, and refused to stay small. Sometimes, when the evening wind blew across the lake, I thought about Amanda. I didn't hate her. Hatred ties you to the very thing you're trying to escape. I only hoped she'd find whatever peace she was chasing when she built her lies. As the sun dipped low, I whispered the same words I'd said to myself on the day I left that old house. No one decides my worth. Not anymore. I turned off the porch light and let the twilight fill the room. In the silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Complete. Because justice isn't about punishment. It's about reclaiming what you lost, your voice, your boundaries, your peace. And on that quiet lakeshore, with the last light fading over the water, I finally knew I'd taken it all back.